Thursdays, Monday to Thursday, 4 to 6 p.m. on Nett Radio, taking you above and beyond.
Welcome everybody, wherever you may be, Trinidad, Tobago, neighbors in the Caribbean, friends who are streaming all around the globe. So glad to have you. It's a beautiful afternoon on the outside, and we welcome you inside of the Drivetime Exchange. I think we are settling down and we are ready to work now. Our journalist extraordinaire, Mr. Tony Fraser. 1 minute there, Tony.
Okay, Shalom.
All right, so I think we're on the inside now. Tony, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, James. How are you?
Well, I'm feeling a lot better now. I was wondering, you know, not often I find the guest is inside before the host.
Sorry about that. I got distracted and whatever. Long story. But I'm here. And I see our three guests are here. Great to have them. And Chalo, we're talking this afternoon about a subject that I know very little of. Maybe you are more familiar with it. It comes from a book that has been written by one of our guests. You see there, and it's about the coral reefs of Trinidad and Tobago. As I indicated, I see genders being ascribed and so on. I'm completely out of it. I can understand a living organism. But when you talk about sexual relations and so on, that sent me over the hill completely. But this is not my story to tell. I am just here to guide our guests. And seriously, it is something that we hear about all the time, that we've been hearing about, especially in Tobago. You go and the reefs are seeming to disappear. And I can understand that in terms of people trampling on them as alleged, etc., and the degeneration. Even that I can understand over a period of time. The technical elements we leave for the experts to deal with. What we want to do this afternoon with our guests, and I'll introduce them in a moment, is to give our listeners and viewers an appreciation of the importance, first of all, the nature of the coral reefs. As I said, I didn't know they exist in that kind of way. And what has been happening to them over a period of time, as the study says, there was one 30 plus years ago, and this is a kind of regeneration of a new one, and a different generation of reefs, and of course, scientists who look at them and examine them and so on. And there are lots of purposes and they fulfill. And we're going to hear about that from our guests. So I am happy to introduce our guest. The writer of the book is Anjani Ganesh. Welcome to the program. Hannah Lochan and Alvin Douglas. Interestingly, I know the parents of the first two. That means a generation has changed on us. Pat Ganesh, Sammy Lochan, etc. But Mr. Douglas, I am meeting him for the first time. Welcome to the program, ladies and gentlemen. You heard my ignorance, not knowing about coral reefs, knowing in a general kind of way that they exist, and people go to various spots in Tobago, etc., to look at them. They dive, and I suppose I have never been in that kind. I stay in the flat bottom boat or the glass bottom boat and look down. I'm so brave to go around there by those fellas. No, more so now. But seriously, Let me start with Anjani and ask um, to give our listeners, our viewers, an appreciation of the reefs. What are they like, and to what purposes they serve the environment, and indeed the national communities where they exist. Anjani,
Thanks. Hi, Tony. Thanks for having me on your show. And
you
yes,
look just like your mother.
yes, my mother did say that she knows you as well. And yeah, no, it's a pleasure to be on and to sort of share our views. And when you started talking about coral gender and sex, I know that's right up Dougie's alley. He makes a lot of joke, and he's worked with us quite closely on sort of the work in coral reproduction and stuff in Tobago, and Hannah's also sort of my right hand in terms of doing the science in Tobago. So it's a really close community that I work with, and often people go, "What's the draw about coral reefs?" And I think it's yeah, the corals are the beautiful. I mean, it's something to be able to see underwater for more than a minute, at a time, and just to be able to like have that world around you. And I kind of fell in love with that with the coral reefs of Tobago, and I have people like Dougie who teaches people to dive to give that experience. And I did my rescue diver with Frontier Divers, his company in Tobago. And there's so much to talk about. I could talk it off in terms of like, the wonders of coral reefs, but
Mhm.
it's an ecosystem where we're still learning about, these are corals are animals, but they look like rocks, and they seem to not do much. And I think when you sort of understand and you go deeper into their biology, that they create these little cities underwater, the skeletons that they have, or the building blocks of underwater cities. So while we create, we construct with concrete, it's done naturally on these reefs, then again you have the many purposes and the functions. So it's just an exciting topic or area to sort of explore so
And
yeah.
Jenny, have they grown up naturally over, I presume, millions of years?
Yeah, so the coral reefs, our present day coral reefs would be about, I would say in the Caribbean, it's a couple thousand years old. So like the 11,000 years old, we've had very consistent climates, right? But they've been born over and over again over, I mean, since that millions of years ago, right? The Paleozoic, which is like, you know, it's all in the books, but it is, so coral reefs have been around for millions and millions of years, and they've regenerated themselves at least 5 times throughout that time.
Okay, let's deal with the purposes of the reefs. Let me hear Hannah on that score. Um, what do they? Why do they exist? Nature has a way of, I suppose, creating things that us normal human beings don't understand well. And you might see a set of coral reefs or some other kind of natural phenomenon and not aware fully of why they exist. Give us that appreciation, Hannah.
Oh, for sure. And thank you so much for having me on the show. My mom did tell me, make sure and tell Mr. Tony you are Marion, Tommy's daughter.
And
But
you also look like both of them. All right.
yes, but yeah, so coral reefs, I mean, so many rules, and it's so important that we take care of it, not just for the fact that we want them to exist, but what the services that they provide to us as a society. So one of the main things you have is this huge wall of reef that is protecting our coastlines and dissipating all this wave action. If we didn't have Buku Reef, we would have Southwest Tobago would look much different than how it looks today. You have all of this protection, and that is one of the major factors and the point of having living reef is that you can have the reef can die and you can have structure, but gradually that structure will degrade. And over time you have less and less protection from the waves. So we need to that is one key aspect, that one key role that coral reefs provide. They also for fisheries. They also serve as a nursery for fisheries, and you have some fishing on the reef, and that also supports livelihoods and that sort of thing. In Tobago, you have people like Dougie who make their living from having these beautiful underwater cities that people will pay big bucks to go down and see and spend time and just take in the beauty of the coral reefs. And I think that
I Something interesting struck my mind. You talk about protecting the shorelines and all of that. So I don't know. I am asking almost in ignorance, in total ignorance, really. Is it a question of nature producing the coral reefs to protect it, or this is incidental to its existence?
That's a
that
good question. No,
I
so I'm just seeing if Hannah wanted to answer, but it's complementary to each other, right? So areas like mangroves require some sheltered environments. They also do coastal protection. So areas like mangroves, back beach environments, seagrass areas, they benefit naturally from those. So it is a evolving thing. I mean, it can be incidental, but the fact that they sort of thrive off of each other's ecosystems is a benefit. So, for example, a lot of the marine life that live on coral reefs, they were born in mangroves and seagrass areas. There's a lot of benefits to the reefs and vice versa to these nearshore and coastal areas.
I'm trying to get at if there is some kind of intelligence for these phenomena to grow in relation. We talk about them growing in relation to each other. Is there some kind of intelligence in nature that says that we have to create these protective barriers to the shore? Am I asking too much of it? I don't know.
No, it's just how you define intelligence, right? So I think an intelligent organism is something that is capable of surviving millions and millions of years with the function of of creating habitat. And this organism or group of organisms have benefited from creating habitats for huge amounts of fish and lobsters and invertebrates because in turn they keep them alive, right? And is it intelligent that they provide so much to our community around them to provide homes and functions in that way, and also to be
Mhm.
adaptable to change, right? So, like I said,
Right.
these reefs have survived, they've come back over five mass extinctions over the history of planet Earth. If you want to talk about
Mhm.
intelligence of humans, Tony, we've been around a lot shorter time, right? Are we going to be able to say the same? Have we survived millions of years, survived multiple extinction events,
Right.
provided an environment that causes us to thrive? So it just
Right.
depends on what you define as intelligence.
Right.
I think it is a different type of intelligence for survival and adaptation in that way.
Yeah.
So
So it's a kind of symbiotic relationship between the environment, between man, etc., etc. Yes.
And just to
Yeah.
add to what Anthony says is too like we know coral reefs, more change is coming at a rapid rate that they can't keep up with. The corals are going to exist way into the future. There are going to be events that they withstand that we likely might not. And it's just to like also keep in mind that in the future coral reefs will exist, just maybe not how we have them right now. Maybe we might not no longer benefit from the services in the same way, but they will exist in the years to
Right.
come.
Okay. So we're talking about the coral reefs of Trinidad and Tobago, and it comes from a book that was recently published. It's called Coral Reefs of Trinidad and Tobago. Anthony Ganes and her colleagues are here to talk about the phenomenon. We won't go into the, well, I certainly can't go into the technical aspects of it, but there is a gentleman here who can tell us something about how do reefs play a part in everyday life? How do people gravitate to looking at the reefs? I've seen them in video and picture, and they look pretty and so on. I won't go on down as I said, but what are the interests of people? What sparks them to want to go down into the water and to view what is below there.
Thank you for having me, Tony. Thank you, thank you. Hi,
But
hi,
Anjali said that I had to invite you, so I didn't have a say in the matter. Go ahead, don't be joking.
Nevertheless, I appreciate it,
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
to your question, just today I was speaking to one of my students about me never having to uh, and I'll use the word hustle or tout diving or tout any kind of an inward underwater activity because there are people among us that have a curious mind. They're curious and fear and anxiety don't stop them from quenching that curiosity. So they venture into the unknown. I am but a gatekeeper of that. So when you come to my shop, I will introduce you to that environment because it is an alien environment and you are supposed to be scared. You are supposed to be anxious. And I tell people all the time, if somebody comes to my shop to learn to scuba dive, to visit the coral reef underwater, and you tell me that I'm not scared or I'm not anxious, I wouldn't want to take it because it means that you're kind of crazy. You're supposed to be, you are supposed to be anxious. That's the frame of mind I expect.
That's absolutely.
So our job in the dive community is to change that fear to a healthy respect for the ocean.
What do people expect? Sorry, I'm trying to get at what do people expect when people come to you and say we want to do a dive, whatever the language is. What do they expect to see and experience?
Well, a lot of them they only they know what the information that is given to them is usually given to them from the TV or from fellow divers or from the news, and it's all exaggerated. Is exaggerated. So when somebody comes in, they ask me today, they ask me about sharks and barracudas and stingrays and all these large creatures. But the uniqueness about the underwater environment actually is in the coral reef because you would see more life in a coral ecosystem 10 minutes of diving in towards the rainforest. So they really don't know what to expect, and we guide them and show them because everything also camouflage, and I would say 100% that this creature, this ecosystem has some type of intelligence. Because
Let me ask a question that a really ignorant question, ignorant in the sense of not being informed. How do you protect someone who is going down to see the reefs from those creatures that you talked about, the shark and so on and so on? Barracuda with the long.
Why do you think that they need protection?
Well, I am asking you. I am asking you why.
The most dangerous, the most dangerous creature in the water is us. Yeah. There's two things that is most dangerous in the water itself, because it's an alien environment, and you, because nothing in the water is malicious.
But you're still not satisfying my fears. Here is an area and an expanse of the reefs and whatever else exists here. But outside of that, there are creatures who are not as friendly as the reefs. And who they want to deal with us. Is it that they don't come into these areas or there's some protective barrier? No. I'm asking in ignorance. Frankly.
No, there's no fence. I mean, the largest hammerhead that I have ever seen in my 35 years of diving was just off shore, and people building Strawberry all the time, and people they just don't know. But there's no fence. It's just that I tell people that we're not on the food, we're not on the menu as food.
Okay.
Because
that's a good response.
But so Dougie, you could also explain to Tony that if you like the stats or the figures, just look at the figures of how many fish attacks or I mean the latest shark attack has probably risen our history from 0 to 1. So but in terms of like the water itself, that's why Dougie builds that competence of knowing how to dive and breathing underwater. Drownings are an issue around the country and worldwide. boat strikes, people getting hit by boats. Those things are definitely. That's why I agree with David. We are. You're more likely to get an incident with another human being
Yeah,
or with the currents themselves. And I think,
yeah,
um, all the fear will dissolve with experience. I mean, as
yes.
with anything, right? So.
No, but I was thinking of if there was some natural barriers, as meaning in this sense that a shark will not come into this area because of X, Y, Z, or whatever other kind of fish that can be dangerous. Is there any natural barriers?
No, the natural barrier that we have is just that they don't know us as food. That's the natural
Okay.
barrier. You
Hmm.
only eat what you know, Tony. Eh?
Hmm.
You only eat what you know, and that's
Yeah.
instinctive.
Tomatoes
That's
eating
instinctive.
things.
I'm
I
going.
mean,
I'm going to leave that alone because I don't want to cause fears in anybody.
no, but
Uh,
Yeah.
No, but
yeah.
I can say I do think that between, I mean, all three of us, I think, have dived. We've dived safely with
yeah,
dolphins, we've dived with sharks, we've dived with barracudas. And I mean, there's a certain awareness you have that when you encounter these animals, but I mean, chances of you encountering them and they letting them see you is you will be okay. They're
Time is
fine.
not helping.
most of the time you see them, they see you
Yes.
before you. They see you
Yeah.
before you see them, and they avoid us.
All
They
right.
let you see them for sure. Like I've dived, Tony, in the far north Great Barrier Reef, on reefs that didn't have any names. They were like codes, right? And these reefs are so remote, hardly visited. They have no names, and the sharks would come up to the surface to check out any boats. But they weren't. That's where you sort of build that respect for animals as non-malicious as Dougie says. They come up and they inspect the divers, and then they go their way.
Yeah.
And it's that sort of. I think we are the less than 1% of persons on Earth who understand that experience or interaction, and it's sort of, and that is the challenge that we have, is breaking that
That's
barrier
fair.
down, that
Yeah.
fear
All right.
down.
So I
So.
have gone past that. As I said, I don't want to create any fear in people and so on.
So
What you
Tony, no
talk about?
excuses. If you come to my
Sorry.
shop, I'm gonna take you on the house. I'm
It's
gonna
all
take
right.
you diving.
It's all right, man. It's all right. I will send my young ones. They're braver than I am. Uh, but seriously, okay, so we have an appreciation of the environment and so on. What are some of the functions of the reefs? What do they do to the environment? How do they interact with the environment in a positive manner? We know that they provide entertainment, they provide leisure, and so on. What are some of the things that we benefit and some of the human activity that goes on in and around the reefs?
Yeah, so Hannah mentioned coastal protection in Southwest Tobago. They're really, really important for protecting our land. There's a lot of, we like to describe coral reefs as a treasure trove, right? So there's a lot of things to still explore and discover. So, for example, in terms of medicine, they have marine sponges that provide anti-malarial drugs, anti-HIV, anti-cancer treatments, and a lot of those, because coral reefs are like that busy underwater city, they have a lot of turf wars. So they do have a lot of, they're packed with toxins to defend themselves from fish, from being eaten and whatnot. And a lot of those toxins have a lot of pharmaceutical value. And it's a lot of, and especially in the Caribbean reefs, we have high sponge communities which have been tapped into sort of use in medicine. And just like food security, being able to fish in your backyard is quite a luxury, and being able to do that sustainably is something that small islands we should be able to try and achieve, So we want to be able to maintain that so that our children could also fish from the reef and get a good lobster or get a good fish.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
benefits.
So,
So
Anjali, you raised something there that piqued my interest. So, we humans get value from the reefs. Is there a chance of degradation, despoilation, like in fishing, overfishing? etc., etc. Is there some way that somewhere, somehow, that the authorities can put some restrictions to safeguard the reefs lasting forever?
Yeah, no, I think like everything you have to manage it, right? Because if you overexploit it, it's gonna degrade quite rapidly, and quite frankly, our we don't manage our marine areas well or at all, if any. So fisheries around Trinidad and Tobago, it's a lot of it is not enforced. I know the new bill hasn't been passed. We have our marine park in Tobago, the Bucca Reef Marine Protected Area. It has a protective status, but it has very little active management, right? So there's very little enforcement, and that's because there's slow processing of, I mean, you can name it, like legislation has the management plan hasn't been approved. There's funding, lack of funding. There's lack of a lot of things, and so you can't have a marine park title without the actual enforcement, because actually it'll be overexploited because of its name. More people
Yeah.
will visit to that area than anywhere else in Tobago purely because of that name. But without the management, we are actually doing it a disservice,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Uh, uh, are you saying that there is not sufficient, or if any at all, management systems to prevent the kind of degradation that is possible and overexploitation?
It's there on paper, but it's not. It's there on paper. There's no teeth to it. There's no consequence or actions. I mean, and I think the first defense that we have is education. You need to have a consistent education and appreciation of the environment. Because if you don't have that, then what's gonna happen? People are gonna be just scared of the environment and take it for granted. And we learn because earlier Tony, you mentioned uh, we used to walk on the reef. They don't do that anymore because there was an educational drive that taught us that listen, these creatures are so sensitive. So almost a third of that Boku reef is destroyed because of it, but they don't do it anymore because they understand the economic value of it. But we need that to trickle down into the schools so that further generations should understand that listen, our greatest assets is our marine ecosystem.
Right.
We don't have that. We have fear.
Hannah, what is the condition generally of the reefs today compared with the studies of 30, 35 years ago? Has there been degradation, loss of whatever capacity of the creatures and so on? And I'm getting to learn to be able to say creatures for reefs because you all are saying it and I'm following that pattern.
No, for
Yes,
sure.
Hannah.
We've seen many changes over the years. So there have been significant impact events that have occurred. So in the 1970s, we had disease outbreaks. We lost a lot. So in the shallows of our reef, we had huge, beautiful
Sorry,
branches.
sorry, Anna.
Yeah.
Explain as you go along. You talk about diseases. What kinds
Yeah.
of
So
diseases?
this would be the white band disease. So it looks as it is. So this really impacted the branching corals. So for those persons who might have snorkeled Mount Irving, these would be the golden branching corals that you'll see. So these covered a lot of our shallow reefs. And this also, a lot of homes for fish, a lot of protection as well from waves. But in 1970s, we lost a lot of our branching corals. And this continued that we still have that disease present on reefs in the Caribbean. We also, in the 1980s, we had the loss of our diadema. So diadema are sea urchins. So these are actual grazers on the reef. So they're going to eat the turf algae. What turf algae does, and we actually have a lot of turf algae on our reef now, is that it just covers the reef. So when you have little organisms, little creatures that want to settle and grow on the reef, they can't because the turf algae covers it. It's kind of like grass. So it's kind of like somebody trying to settle on grass. You can't build a stable home on something that's like floating. And so that is another major issue that we had, losing a lot of our sea urchins that were key grazers on our reefs. In 2005 and 2010, we had major bleaching events. So this was just hit after hit. And, in these events, you have stress corals, and, a lot of our coral cover was lost. We have from 2005 and 2010. These are the key massive builders, the key huge corals that provide a lot of structure to our reef. And we are currently at about 15% coral cover in Tobago. So that is considered. So when you talk about healthy reefs, healthy people, so it's so well.
Okay,
I
we
think we
lost
lost Hannah. Oh,
a little bit of internet connection there. So, Anthony, pick up that. We'll come back to her in a moment. Let me ask you, where are the coral reefs in Trinidad and Tobago? We know of Tobago, but give us a sense of where the reefs are and how widespread they are. How many of them we have? Not in literal numbers like 10 or 12 or so, but give us a sense as that we have something of
yeah, of course. I'm hoping you can hear me because we're on the same network.
I don't know
So,
what happened to that.
yeah.
Yes, we're
No,
hearing you.
yeah, perfect. So Tobago is really where all the developed coral reefs are. And when I say developed, that means that you have corals that grow and they create structure over years and years and years, right? Whereas in Trinidad, we will have coral communities. They live and they die, but they don't. There's not enough of them to build that reef, right? Except for
That's
northeast
interesting.
Tobago.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Some education for myself and our listeners as we go along. You talk about a community, and is it that there is need for some kind of sense of I don't know, a number of them to exist, to continue to exist. Like 10 people won't live very long, over 50 years, unless they expand and so on. And so, is that the case with the coral reefs?
I think they sort of we refer to them as ecosystem engineers, right? So they change the environment as they grow. And so the first coral, for example, will change the currents around them. And therefore there'll be other types of corals that will grow in the lee of that coral, right? And then they create that ecosystem that way. So they definitely benefit from growing around each other. That's why coral reefs, that's why you find them all in one area, and that's how they benefit. It's the same concept for rainforests and diversity of tropical rainforests. It's the same thing that applies to coral reefs. And Tobago, being that far from the Orinoco,
Sorry.
also most most reefs are
By the
most
drugstore.
Okay,
yeah. So
s-
sorry.
we
No,
seem to
so
have some. Go ahead, Anthony.
yeah, you can hear me now. So
Yeah.
most bays around Tobago actually have coral reefs. So you think of Englishman's Bay, Pirates Bay, Charlottesville, Speyside. There are reefs associated with most of the bays and that's because the conditions historically of Tobago are suitable, which is very clear waters, very suitable water temperatures, no giant runoff from the Orinoco that creates that silty environment that we get in the Gulf of Paria, because they need that clean surface to attach to. So yeah, they're very very common in Tobago, in Trinidad, northeast Trinidad, so Toco, Solibia side. I'm sure if you've gone to Solibia by the lighthouse area, you see the waves break offshore, and that means that there's a properly developed reef that is protecting that coastline, and you have a back reef environment that benefits from it too.
Right. So, do they grow naturally? Are there conditions that exist to allow them to develop and grow?
Yeah. So they're referred to as they grow in the tropics. They like the warm temperatures. They need clear conditions because corals actually use sunlight to grow, and it's not actually the coral host. They actually have tiny algae that live in the tissues of the corals that harness sunlight, and then the algae provides the coral with the excess food to create their skeletons and whatnot. They can't have because they need light. They can't have murky conditions. They can't tolerate high sedimentation. A lot. If you look at the rainy season in Trinidad, we have all that river runoff and stuff. They don't tolerate river outflows very well. There is some level of tolerance, but it's gotten worse as we as we concrete or dry river, our river beds that don't buffer the sediments, it's gotten worse. And so the impacts on the coastal areas and coral reefs is worse as well.
Okay. I see Hannah is back with us. You dropped off a moment ago. You were in mid-flight in something.
No.
Continue from there.
I had my points and the internet failed me. Right, so we reached the bleaching events. So right, so I was saying right, so somewhat healthy reefs and healthy people and the connectedness that we have. If you have it says that if you have a healthy reef, you have a thriving reef, you have a thriving society. That means you have a society that's managing its resources, that's also sustainably using the reefs, and that's what we want to get ourselves toward. And the coral cover at Buku, and we have a lot of people that will come to us and be like, "Oh, we went and it looks dead, or why is it so brown, and why is it so dark?" But you have to also understand the reefs of Tobago. They're really special reefs. It's not gonna look like Frankie Nemo. It's not gonna look like the Pacific. But it's just important to own and understand what you have. And currently, there is another disease that we are on the lookout for, which is stony coral tissue loss disease. So this has decimated coral reefs from Florida. It originated in Florida in 2014 and has since spread down the island chain. Tobago is so far the last island that has not reported this disease, but we have colleagues in Colombia, in Mexico, and they say they've lost millions, hundreds and thousands of corals, and their reefs are just so different now. And that is also a lot of the work that Angie and I are doing, is raising awareness on this disease, teaching people how to identify it, how to report it, because we know it's coming. We know it's not gonna miss Tobago. It's the ocean. Currents travel. The pathogen, the virus is going to travel, and we will get it eventually. And it's also sad seeing what so many other places have lost that we still have, and we know we're gonna lose. So we have some populations of the big boulder brain coral. So Tony, I don't know if you know that massive coral that we have in Speyside, the big brain. So that is a boulder brain coral, and that species of coral has been lost in many other countries in the northern Caribbean, and even in Curacao, they're lucky if they find one, and we still have so many, and it's it makes us really emotional and trying to protect the last, not just the last of Tobago, but the last of the Caribbean. And it really it empowers us to really work towards and continue what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I see the emotion and all of that, and it has developed a question in my mind. I mean, let me ask the two young scientists. Alvin is a scientist of a different kind. What attracted you to this? I mean, there is medicine, there is law, there are engineering, there are all kinds of things. How do you get it into your head, into your mind, that you're going to look after and study these creatures? And I'm getting along with the language. I can refer to them as creatures now. Creatures below the surface of the sea, the top of the water. What attracted you? Let me hear the stories. Anjani and Hannah.
I mean, I
Who do you
didn't
want
want
to
to be
take
in an
the first?
office. It didn't start from falling. I didn't know what corals were either, right? Growing up in Trinidad, and I loved to snorkel down the islands. My grandfather fished, so I had the luxury of being able to go on a boat and being able to learn to swim and stuff. And frankly, I just wanted to stay outside the office. And I realized the more research you do in the field means more office time. So I think it's sort of it's a slow experience and building a respect for an ecosystem that you just sort of learn to enjoy and view, and having that luxury of being able to dive in different places around the Caribbean, around the world, to see how these reefs naturally vary from place to place. I think, and just understanding the science of it, you build a respect for this ecosystem. So it was not love at first sight for sure. Like every marine biologist wanted to study whales and dolphins and turtles and stuff, and nobody wanted to study, you know, a jellyfish cousin called coral, so it was not necessarily, yeah, it's not, it's nowadays it's grown as a field, but I was very ignorant.
It wasn't very fashionable at one point in time. No? Yeah. Hannah. Yeah, but you left the
Okay,
land.
so
You left
I
the land to go into the sea.
did
Why?
leave the land. I did. I did. I think I might be the only person in my family that scuba dives. But yes, similar. I was good in science in Form 6, and I was like, what am I gonna do at university? So I signed up for biology, and it was only my second year after we did a field course in Tobago. I was with a couple of scientists at UWE, and that transformed my life. I didn't even know Tobago had coral reefs. So we spent a week and we did a field course, and it was absolutely amazing. And since then, I kind of knew the trajectory of my life would be, yeah, marine focus, marine science. And luckily, I've had opportunities to continue in this field and work with Angie. I mean, luckily for me, I mean, my parents were very open. I know my mom always told me one thing is, make sure you give back to society. That is your duty. Whatever you do, whatever you choose to do, make sure you contribute meaningfully. And I do think that is something always at the back of my mind, and I try to make sure that's something that through my work, through the work with Angie and the Institute, that we give back and we contribute to building a healthy society. So that is where it kind of generated from.
Let me ask Calvin, if you're thinking about the sea in Tobago, you're a fisherman. You're not going beneath the surface to look at coral reefs and so on. How did you get into this thing, or it just happened?
Actually, ironically, I was introduced to scuba diving by a fisherman. A fisherman came to my integrated science class and said that sharks need to swim all the time to breathe. And I had to quench the curiosity. I had to quench my curiosity. So I went to the only establishment on the island, and I was curious to see a shark. But then when I got into the
From a
environment,
safe distance, I presume.
so from a distance, sorry.
From a safe distance, I presume. Well,
Well,
you wanted to see a shark.
yeah,
I'm saying from a safe distance.
From a safe distance, but they don't allow you to get close to them, eh?
Okay.
They don't allow you to get close to them.
That's good, Miney.
But what that environment, appreciation in our environment comes in stages. So first is the stage of curiosity, and then after it was the stage of necessity. I needed a job and I love doing it. And how many people work in an environment where they like doing it? So it doesn't feel like a job. And then it's now therapy for me. Okay, it is also an opportunity to affect lives, because people come to my shop all the time and say, Dougie, you can't remember me 25 years ago. I took you diving, and because you never forget the experience of being in that environment. The therapy lies in being in an environment where you are so stimulated by the color and the creatures, and you are also stimulated by the water itself, because you have a weightless feeling in the water. And if you know me, I'm somewhat on the heavy side. So being in the water for me it takes the weight off my legs. So
that's a nice way to deal with it.
What else can you do where you are stimulated by color, by fish life? You can't speak to interrupt your thoughts. So you have 45 minutes of introspection while being stimulated, while being weightless. It is such a therapeutic place. But when you start doing it for the first time, when you come over to Tobago and I take you diving, it's not gonna be therapy for you. It's gonna be a rush of adrenaline. But after a while, you learn to go into that environment until you see a coke tin, and then you realize, God, humans again destroying the last beauty of the planet.
One thing I like is your faith in me to do these things. I wish I had it myself. But seriously, we're gonna come back to the discussion in a moment. But we go back to the studio to Sir Charles. Sir Charles, I am sure that a lot of this, well, I am saying that I'm hoping that you share my ignorance, so I'm not alone in this matter. But I'm sure that a lot of this is quite interesting and perhaps new to you and new to our listeners. And incidentally, they want to come and call us and talk to the three persons that we have here. Feel free. Over to you, Charles.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much, Tony. We will be back shortly.
Wake up with the Nett Radio Breakfast Show. Rise and shine with Wendell Stevens and Richard Raghubarsing, weekdays, from 6 o'clock to 9 a.m. Start your day feeling good, energized, and informed as we tackle the biggest issues of the day, get you where you need to be on time, and keep you in the know about everything that matters. We bring you insightful discussions, expert analysis, and the latest updates so you're always ahead of the curve. Mornings matter. Your voice matters. And it all starts right here on New Era TT Radio, Nett Radio. The Nett Radio Breakfast Show, weekdays 6 to 9 a.m. Wake up informed and stay ahead.
S&H Rumbox, 137 Western Main Road, St. James, for all your retail and wholesale needs for alcohol and non-alcoholic beverages. Call us at 686-0599 or visit us at 137 Western Main Road, St. James. S&H Rumbox, drinking out of the box.
Advertise with us on New Era TT Radio, the fastest growing streaming platform for talk in Trinidad and Tobago. Audio and video ads welcome. Elevate your brand with us. Connect with us at newerattradio@yahoo.com or call us at 299-5156. Now what are you waiting for?
Join me, Brother David Muhammad, every Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. here on New Era TT Radio, Nett Radio, Powerful Radio. Join me to hear knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Tuesdays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. here on New Era TT Radio, Nett Radio.
The future of radio is here. New Era TT Radio, Nett Radio. Let's go.
Welcome you back to the Drivetime Exchange right here on New Era TT Radio, and trust me, we not leaving. Of course, you are streaming on the newerattradio.com. That's our website, so you can come check us out. You can look for us on New Era TT Radio. On your browser, you will get us on TuneIn, so you can also get us on any one of your smart devices. Yeah, and you can get us on all our social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And of course, in the morning time, remember you can get us for our breakfast show on M&E TV, which streams to Flow, Digicel, Tracor, Amplia, and most of those cable channels throughout the morning period. But of course, this is the afternoon drive time with Tony Fraser. So we get back to this very interesting topic of the coral reefs, Tony.
Yes, Chalo, we are all being educated, and we hope our listeners, our viewers, are so educated. And we're going to come to that in a moment in terms of how, well, we better get to it, how widespread in Trinidad and Tobago is there interest in the coral reef? Sorry, is there a widespread interest? A place like Tobago, and I'm not seeking Tobago from the rest of Trinidad because there are environments like Tobago in Trinidad on the north coast, etc., etc. How wide is this knowledge and appreciation of the coral reefs? Go ahead, Anjali.
Oh, no, I mean, I would like to know that answer as well, to be honest. I would think there's definitely, in terms of our networks, there's a lot of interest in terms of visitors to the island who come for coral reef related activities. I think it's about 42% that comes to Tobago for reef related activities, quote unquote. So either like snorkeling, diving, beach bathing, glass bottom boats, so we do get a lot of international interest in our coral reefs. I'm not sure how it translates to, our local communities. I do know that we are slowly becoming a more, ocean savvy community. You see an increase in spearfisher with the young folks who are, who like to go hunting on the beach or rocky environments around Trinidad and Tobago. So I think the interest is definitely growing as people who learn to swim and who become, learn to sail and boat and stuff. And so activities on the waters is increasing. So, yeah, I mean, I don't have numbers, but it's definitely a growing population, especially the younger groups. Yeah.
Yeah, Alvin will surely have a sense of the interest because that's your business.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to say, my local brothers and sisters are not very interested in the coral reef in particular. They might be interested in bathing in the sand or bathing on the beach waist high, but they don't understand how that ecosystem affects them. They don't. Let me give you an example. Just a few years ago, the Pigeon Point flooded. Pigeon Point was underwater. The boats and everything almost washed away. And people scratching their head and wondering why. you know, the coral reef is there to protect that coastal environment. And let me tell you something, Tony. I am just like you. I am not a scientist at all. So when these two ladies speak, I take notes. I take notes all the time. I'm constantly educated by them. But also, I am in real time. I'm here every day. In my lifetime, I've seen the changes in the ecosystem I work. I'm forced to be an environmentalist. I have to be an environmentalist because it affects me directly. But what is frustrating is that it affects the entire island. It's just that the entire island doesn't know it. So when you go into the schools and you say, listen, let's try to pick out the people who would help us along the way. They say, oh, Dougie, no, we're not allowed to take our students in a body of water. But you're surrounded by water. You are surrounded by water.
I suppose that's the Ministry of Education determination,
Oh, yeah. So
not the schools themselves. Yeah.
But there are schools that have worked, that have found a way to work around that. And they come over. I mean, I will mention one school that for years have been coming here, Asher Boys from San Fernando. And they are from plumb in the middle of San Fernando. They come to Tobago 3 and 4 times a year, and a whole classroom of students, they come and they dive, They study the book reef. They do lionfish hunts. They do night dives. They work with people like in IMA. I mean, it's amazing. It's sad to see that our educational system for the average person doesn't push that enough. So unfortunately, if we don't start now to at least educate, I don't think it's gonna cost us millions to start making sure that there's a campaign of awareness of the importance of the Buku Reef. Not even the Buku Reef, coral reef in entirely, you know? It's not gonna take a lot from us.
Okay, so we are talking about the coral reefs around Trinidad and Tobago. There's a lot of focus on Tobago, but because perhaps Tobago has been the most popular, the most well known, and perhaps the most developed, I don't know, I'm guessing. There's some kind of focus on Tobago. Let me branch off into one critical area, as everybody has touched on in one way or the other. But let me talk about the environmental situation. And we know today is that um, the whole business of climate change and the damages that has started already on the parts of the earth. And I want to read a line or two from the book, as we said. Let's do some free advertising, Anjali. Next time you'll have to pay us for it, but it's okay. We give you some free advertising.
Much
Uh,
appreciated.
Incidentally, where is the book available? As we start talking about it.
Yeah, so the books that are already available are actually going into the school libraries. What we have is a pre-order form for the next batch. And so I have a link that I can probably share with you, Tony, to put on your website and stuff. So it allows you to order the book. Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just read the top line of page 182. There is significant foreboding with respect to the projected impacts of climate change on small island nations. I think we are aware of that. We know the small island nation grouping of countries always contending about the industrial world, and we in the small island nations are suffering because of the kind of development they have pursued over the last 500 years. The future of our coast and coral reefs relies heavily on innovative research in conservation and restoration. And the conservation and restoration part is what I would love you all to dive into at this point in time. How do we go? I think you all have said that we are aware that there is a measure of negative impact, perhaps more than a measure. There is a measure of negative impact on coral reefs by our existence. Humans tend to destroy everything around them, including each other. Um, what are the restorative measures that we have to engage in to save the reefs from going further into damage?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and it's a challenge actually for many of us. Um, I know the trendy term for small island nations is actually big ocean states. It's trying to flip the minds of people to say that we actually have a lot of ocean resources that we can sustainably tap into, and use that development in our conservation and restoration strategies. But in terms of like conservation, it's what we spoke about before in terms of basic enforcement and management tied to more adaptive management to climate change, right? So creating resilient systems, right? So not just resilient corals and coral reefs, but also resilient communities. So that is sort of the idea that we're trying to do through the Institute of Marine Affairs, right? So it is where we learn strategies of coral adaptation. That is research strategies that have been done in Hawaii, where we observe the corals that survive those bleaching events, because corals don't necessarily all die from bleaching, but the ones that survive, they're the ones that we can breed and stock for our future generations, right? So they would be the forefathers of our future coral reefs. And so being able to track, study these resilient coral species, being able to assist in coral breeding, which is a strategy that we are also working on for Tobago. So we talk about coral reproduction, understanding that sexual reproduction has a level of genetic diversity, right? So they're not clones, but they understanding a future of disturbances, you're going to have a subset of those coral or coral babies that will be resistant to disease or resistant to um, coral bleaching. And those are the populations we want to be able to encourage to grow in. So that's our job, is doing the research to find out the best methods in that type of coral restoration for yeah, jumpstarting adaptation.
Yeah, I haven't been doing my job very well because you've been talking about coral bleaching, and I have not asked you what is that. You inform our listeners and viewers about what do you mean by coral bleaching and what are the possible negative effects because of it.
Yeah, no, exactly. So coral bleaching is essential. So corals are a cousin of jellyfish, right? But they live in one spot. They have a rocky skeleton, and they have this special symbiotic relationship with algae that lives in its tissues. So when you look at those beautiful magazines of coral reefs, all these bright colors of reds and greens and browns and whatnot, that color is provided by the algae that grows inside the coral host. That algae relies on sunlight to get food through photosynthesis, and then it provides a lot of food to the corals so the corals can grow their structure. And it's a really good relationship when the environment is good. What happens is that under like stress events, so if the conditions are too hot or if it's too cold, there's a perfect medium in which they live in happiness. If those conditions are prolonged in that heat stress, that relationship breaks down and the algae gets expelled from the coral host, turning the coral host white, which is the skeleton underneath. So that's that bleaching event. It loses its color. Now, when corals bleach, it doesn't die, but if the heat stress persists, it means that the coral's not getting its primary source of food, but also the coral's also being stressed out by the heat. So if it's persistent and it's severe, the corals will die, but if the heat stress is removed, the algae will be reincorporated back into the tissues and the corals will have that happy symbiosis again. So we do see coral bleaching on a mass scale when you have these marine heat wave events that are largely connected to climate change.
Okay, Hannah, can we exist comfortably in an environment where the corals are bleached out, to use Anthony's word, which I admit not to know too much about. But seriously, what will be the impact? And we're putting this in the context of climate change, which we know a hell of a lot about in terms of the language, in terms of it's been existing for some time and so on, but not so much about coral reefs. If coral reefs, stop existing because of man's damage, what will we lose?
Well, I mean, I think we touched on a lot of the positives of coral reefs, and that is what we will lose, these services to us, the services that they provide to society. But if corals get lost, it's fine, they will be okay, they will survive somewhere else, but we are the ones that will suffer. We are the ones that will have more stronger surges on our shores. We are the ones that will have less food, less fish that we could pull in for staining. We are the ones that would have lower biodiversity. We are the ones that would have reefs that people would want to visit. And we need to understand that is how we will be affected. If all the corals were to die, we likely, Dougie would have a hard time finding people who might want to dive. They might have no interest. And that is his livelihood. We glass water boaters, you guys, I mean, they work very hard. They take the boats out in coral gardens and Buku is dead and no one wants to go. So I think it's the impact it will have on society and the impact it will have on livelihoods. And that will have cascading effects of a what word do I want to say, of an unhealthy society. You have healthy reefs, you have a healthy society. You have unhealthy reefs, you have a society that is not thriving in the way that it should.
Right. And of course, there are economic impacts that
Yeah.
will have on the society as a whole.
So in
And
2006, there was an economic valuation conducted by one of the scientists, and it is about 100 coral reef related activities, indirectly and indirectly, have an impact of about per year about 130 million US dollars. Granted, this is in 2006. This
are you talking about internationally
no,
or
this is
to
Tobago.
Trinidad? To,
Tobago's reefs.
go with those figures again.
So it's over 100 million US per year in coral reef related activities, directly and indirectly. And that is from 2006. And granted, it might be a bit different now, but we understand the value, we understand the science, we understand the economics. It's to bring the management into play so that we can protect as we need to.
Mhm. So a serious economic impact and serious impact on the trade and the business of somebody like Alvin.
And by the way, Tony, that with bleaching events, they have basically said that severe bleaching events would cut that by half if there's not much recovery in long term. So we have to look at the recovery of the reefs and conservation of it in order to keep that value up, right? And so we have that risk when it comes to climate change.
Yeah. What kind of employment impact? I'm going to Alvin now. What kind of employment impact uh, do the reefs visitations to the reefs, knowledge of them, what fishermen do, etc., etc. What kind of impact that really negative happenings to the reefs will occur in Tobago?
Well, that's a pretty good question. I mean, if you think about the tourism product that we offer, I know that you guys said that almost 50% or 40 something percent do some kind of a in-water activity. But I would say that almost 80 or 85% of our visitors, they go into the water in some way, some fashion. So when we lose the reef, we lose an industry that's one of the only tourism industry that is almost owned 100% by the locals. The glass bottom boats. The glass bottom boats started off as an environmental experience. But now so many people go on to the reef, so many people fish on the reef, so many people visit the reef that if we were to lose that reef in a short period of time, it's going to be devastating to the tourism. It's going to be devastating to the private sector also because the private sector in Tobago is very small. Even what is smaller, the private sector that is owned by indigenous Tobagonians. And Tobagonians tend to own the glass bottom boats, the tours, the coastal tours, they own these things. So the fishermen will have to go further to fish to find livelihood. So it's gonna be sad. I would add also to that our the I mean from experience I know that the reef can take some stress from climate change. It could take some stress from the global warming and the rough seas, and it could take some stress from man-made pollution. But to have all three consistently for an extended period of time, it's not gonna last long. I mean, it's like fast track to the destruction of our and I was always coin the frame that it's our one of the country's um most important natural resources. We boast some of the best diving in the world, not only. I'm talking about the region. We boast some of the best diving in the world. Why? Because if you swim more than 5 meters off store bay, you will end up on an ecosystem that can rival any ecosystem on the planet. if you go off Speyside, just where the school is, you have the largest rainfall in the world. And it's because there's such a unique balance in our waters that the coral reef thrives and it's even stronger. But it's sad to see from our side we're not doing what we need to do to maintain that for our kids.
Yeah.
You know?
Coming to that, that's my next area of investigation. Um, well, first of all, is there a particular agency coming out of one of the secretary's office to offices, sorry, one of the secretary's offices that is responsible for the protection, the growth, and the development of the coral reefs?
But the fisheries department is the closest that I would think of. The fisheries department, and natural, I think it's natural resources. There's a
The Department of Marine Resources and
that's right.
Fisheries under Division for Food Production,
That's right.
Forestry and Fisheries in THA. But the thing,
Thanks, Angie.
no, but it's a complicated issue, and obviously you have fisheries and agriculture in Trinidad as well. That's responsible for the fishing industry for both islands. But the complicated things are, yes, I think we can understand in terms of like Buko Reef and stuff. We understand their challenges, but then there are the bigger issues like land-based sources of pollution, which is something we didn't touch on before. Dougie brought it up, which requires land planning and land management. So then you have to have interagency collaboration. You have wastewater management, which is WASA, which is another agency, and it's having that collaboration to sort of manage our black water and grey water, because that is a huge issue in Southwest, a huge issue across two islands. All our grey water gets into our rivers, which then flows directly to our seas, right? And then talking about 1 point how many million people of us that don't have our grey water treated or whatnot. I'm sure there are communities where they do, but that is a big issue. And I'm not talking just coral reef, I'm talking about all our coastal ecosystems.
I used to know the figures about that because I did few years ago, 10 years, 15 years ago, I did some work with WASA on the same subject. And the ratio of treated water that goes into the seas and the oceans is pretty small. As I said, I won't venture a figure because I don't remember it, but what I remember in terms of the treated water, it's quite small. I remember years and years ago when I was a reporter on the beat, doing a story. There was a period of time, you're too young to know these, when we had all of these communities being built. It was during one of those oil booms, and there was a lot of money in the society, and a lot of communities were built up by investors, private investors, and they had their own sewer systems. And you know what? After 5, 10 years, they walked away from it. And I remember doing one in the Maloney area, and across one of the persons who took us there, and he pointed us to a field of, I don't know, patchoy or some cabbage or something like that, beautifully green, fed by the untreated water out of the system. So that you can imagine, I can imagine what is happening in some of those areas that you will talk about.
Let me, for example, everybody is touting the Boko, the Boko village. If you go down to Boko village, there's the mangrove that is supposed to be on the side, and the mangrove and the wetland is there for a reason. So it's a natural treatment for the runoff. So now it's a popular bay because the water is nice and clear. There's no more runoff there. So people that is one of the more popular beaches. That's that Boko Bay area. But they don't understand, because of the fact that we've destroyed that natural filtration system. how destructive it is to the Boku Reef. Because now the runoff isn't filtered anymore, it goes straight into the water onto the reef. But John Public doesn't know that. They don't know that because they're frolicking in nice clear water now and it looks nice and the mangrove now is there. There's no swampy water, there's no smelly water. So everything is good. But it's not everything is good. We're just destroying the things that is keeping us alive. And that's just one example.
And you remind me, Alvin, of my reporting, and some of it went into Tobago also. And the picture was a pretty one. The systems are, that was 20 years ago. I don't know what has happened since then. But I remember we went to some of the big hotels on the island. And I don't want anybody to stop anybody from going to them. But the picture was the pretty one. But there has been some development of a Scarborough wastewater system over the years, hasn't there? Been? So it's a little bit better now. As I say, I don't want to frighten away visitors, myself included, from the area.
I can tell you, yeah, go ahead, Dougie.
Tobago, and we try not to, when you're environmentalist, you try not to be political or anything, but I'm going to go into a sensitive topic. The fact that we are underdeveloped is actually saving our environment. The big hotels and the development is actually it's somewhat saving our environment. A lot of the environmentalists that visit our show, and by the way, people from all over the world come to study our unique waters. They boast that, listen, Tobago, don't tell anybody about Tobago. Okay? And because they said that, okay, Tobago has been is a ward of Trinidad. Ironically, it's not a bad thing for our environment. I think we can learn from the other Caribbean islands how to strike the balance of preserving our environment and making sure our tourism thrive and making sure that we reap the benefits of our natural resources. We could do that.
Hannah, what kind of educational, informational program that is required from primary schools right up to households, people working, those who contributed, our waterways. Incidentally, a couple of weeks ago, we had on the program somebody talking about the plastics situation. I don't know what it is like in Tobago, but the plastics situation in Trinidad is particularly bad for the environment and so on. What is required, Hannah, in Tobago?
It's a big question. Like you said, I think education is a big factor. Education that where it comes in from the schools, comes in secondary schools. Part of our project at IME is going to these schools, is teaching them about what we're doing here is about the engagement, about increasing their knowledge of their own ocean backyards. We do walkarounds in the communities that we're going to do work in. And, we ask people, and people are really interested, and many people might not know what a coral is and how we can protect it. But we do, during these walkarounds, we do notice that people are genuinely interested. And apart from the education, it's also the implementation and the enforcement of the rules. Is that if you do something, there must be a consequence. A lot of us, a lot of things in Trinidad and Tobago have gone without consequences for a long time, and it's become the norm. And that it's so hard. It's so hard to undo a bad behavior. It's so hard to come now and say, okay, we're going to charge, we're going to implement, that. And it should have been done years ago. It wasn't done. And you can't say that it's too late. It's never too late. You need to start somewhere. And I think that between education and actual implementation of the rules that we have, and these rules based on policies that you ask IME, you ask the scientific agencies for, you ask us for the research and we do it. You ask for the economic value and it's submitted, and the information is there. You just need the political will to push through, because you can say that individuals have a certain role to play, and that's true, but at the same time, you need your government to be on board. You need your government to lead the country, and lead in a way that, is going to be beneficial for creating a better society. So I would say, yeah, education, implementing the rules that we have, and having the political will to really push for the environmental protection that it's not a secret. We need it. Everyone is aware of how important it is, and the ocean is being talked about, much more than ever before. We just finished the United Nations Oceans Decade, all of these plans, and I think that the political will needs to step forward and truly take their duty in providing that protection. And gradually, we will see, I do believe that we will see a better society for it.
Okay, we're talking about the reefs around Trinidad and Tobago, and of course, there is a focus on Tobago because Tobago, as we've learned here, Tobago has perhaps more popular reefs. I don't know about the quantity, the numbers, the space occupied, and so on. So Tobago is a focus, and of course, it's a focus too because the nature of the economy of Tobago resides significantly in tourism. And when we talk about tourism, it's not only people coming from Australia and England and wherever, but it's people from Trinidad and people from throughout the Caribbean coming to experience this business of the environment and so on. Alvin is in a position, being somebody who I presume, you correct me if I'm wrong, you take people diving, you take people on tours, that kind of thing, talk to them about the environment. Is that gaining any traction? Um, you talked about Tobago a moment ago, but the visitors from Trinidad and the rest of the Caribbean.
They yes, and we have the international visitors. They come in, and that niche, the dive niche, is what actually keeps or the environmentalists, I should say, is what really keeps the dive industry alive. They are passionate about the dive industry, so that niche is very important for Trinidad. The Trinidad diver tends to they like the educational aspect of it. So they come to for the certificates and they want to go higher, they want to level, or they want to hunt. So we try to kind of curtail them the hunting to lionfish because lionfish is invasive. So when they come over to do any kind of a spear fishing, we tend to introduce them to the lionfish hunting mostly.
I'm sorry, before you go on, what's this fascination with the lionfish? It seems to have become quite popular now.
Oh yeah,
10 years ago, I never heard of a lionfish.
Yeah, it's delicious. It's well, the girls will tell you, the ladies will tell you a lot better. But from my point of view, it's invasive, so it's doesn't belong in our waters. And what does that mean? It means that it is going to, there is no natural predator, and I equate it to being like an underwater cockroach or underwater rat. It is going to multiply. No, nothing in our waters know that it's food or it can be eaten, and it multiplies rapidly. So what's gonna happen is, and it's a ferocious eater, it eats everything. So what's gonna happen after a while? You're not gonna be able to get snappers and groupers and lobsters. You only eat lionfish. But let me tell you, it is absolutely delicious. When I catch lionfish, nobody gets it. I take it home because it is delicious. You have to know how to handle it.
So that's one way of dealing. That's one way of dealing with the oversupply.
Oh yeah. If everybody could and you know what, I don't care. I'll keep it a secret. If people don't want to eat it, give it to me because it's the only fish. You know the thing about fish. I love fish, but fish is something. It always gives you an aftertaste. Lionfish, for some reason, the meat is white, it's tender. You could eat it raw. You could squeeze a lime on it and eat it, and it is absolutely the best fish that you can eat in the water. But it's the most dangerous fish for our ecosystem. So
right, because it's destroying the other fish around.
Yes, it's
other
destroying
species. What
Yeah.
about the environment? Is it impacting on the coral reefs themselves? Anjali
About it.
and Hannah, uh,
Okay.
you
I
join
would
them. Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
No,
All
no.
three of you,
So
all three of you.
at the same time, no, I think so. Indirectly, it'll impact coral reefs because corals depend on a a local fish community. So they depend on the parrotfish, they depend on to eat the algae, it depends on the meso predators or the small predators like the snappers and the groupers and the sharks and the barracudas. It really requires a healthy fish community to be advocates for corals, right? So sharks will take care of overpopulation of smaller fish, especially like damselfish, and therefore when the lionfish they often target juvenile fish. They act like a vacuum. They kind of hoover up all the small little fish around them, and so that's how it really makes a dent in the fish community. And so the less lionfish on our reefs, the better for our reefs, essentially.
Okay, okay, Hannah, you have to put the microphone.
Yeah, no, this is second, Anthony. That yeah, it we protecting the other species, protecting the other parrotfish, protecting the and just yeah, not having lionfish would have more populations of the other fish that we need on our reefs. And the fact that it doesn't have a predator is also a big factor because everything has a predator. Once it's invasive and it doesn't have a predator, we have a lot more work to do with respect to control of its population.
Except for Alvin, he's the only predator.
He can do the job.
don't ask me these hard questions after you've asked these ladies because I can't add anything to what they're saying, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
We
You've
have
added your
a
piece. You've added your piece already. You've said that the lionfish is beautiful. It's a wonderful taste, and therefore we should
it's
make some
beautiful.
more, make
When
some
I
more fish birds.
let me
Listen.
tell you how people are so serious about this environment. Eh? Even as an invasive creature, when we take divers out, when we take divers on a coral reef and we see a lionfish, it's so beautiful and it blends in so well that we don't remove it there and then. We would show them they are filled with awe, they spend their money, they now give you 50 to 75 US dollars for that dive. And then when we drop them to shore, we go back and we kill it.
Now, where did they migrate from? It seems to be a recent something a few years ago.
They came in around 20. Well, they invaded Tobago around 2012, but it was the ferries that it was released in Florida from the aquarium trade. I don't know which hurricane, whether it was like Hurricane Andrew or one of the many hurricanes that Florida experiences, but it might have been um, unintentional release or intentional release, and they suspect two different types of lionfish that were released in Florida. And then basically over the years, it has migrated throughout the wider Caribbean region. And again, like everything else, Tobago and Trinidad were the last to sort of get lionfish in 2012.
Is it a created species, or man in some
Um,
kind of test tube situation created this
no,
fish?
sorry. So they are native to the Indo-Pacific region, and because the groupers and the sharks, they are the predators for them in that region. When you go and you dive in the Great Barrier Reef, lionfish, they are hidden under summer rock. It is a very rare sight in the Indo-Pacific because they have those predators that really keep them in check. In the Caribbean, they're out flashing their lovely fins. They're very
Yeah.
bold faced in the Caribbean because they're like, there's nothing here. There's very different behavior between the two regions, and you can tell that they know, right? So,
Wow, wow. Some information and education there. As we wind down on this program, I want to go to each one of you to give our listeners, our viewers, a sense of the most imminent things that have to be done to preserve and conserve the reefs that we have. and the kind of institutional care that has to be impacted on the situation. And Jenny, you're on camera, so go ahead.
Okay, I will not. I will leave things to everybody else as well. No, I think immediately, I think we need the political will, the drive, the money, the budget to go towards our management of our ocean systems, not just our coral reefs, but general our fisheries management. Of course, more more research into strategies of restoration, strategies of building adaptation into our ecosystems of our coral reefs, and that's sort of the most immediate thing. And then you have like the long term strategies, really building a community that really understands our ocean backyards. So I'll just start you all off with that.
Yeah, so I can pick up from that. So what I think is very important is the collaboration with general public, collaboration with the communities. I mean, Tobago has some really strong communities that really care, that they know what they're about. I mean, they understand the importance, and I think it's really harnessing the talent and the energy of the students as well, and building that education of it, because we know we walk around, we host workshops. I mean, the attendance sometimes varies, but the persons who come have a clear vested interest, and I think that is what we need to really, yeah, harness that energy and use it to transform the what we do. And working with persons who, like I had mentioned before, the stony coral tissue loss disease, like have raising awareness for that, having persons feeling, comfortable liaising, messaging Angie, messaging me, talking to Institute of Marine Affairs, anything you see, any marine incident, anything you see on the reef that just doesn't look right to you, you can always call it in, and we'll always be all ears, because we don't have eyes on the reef all the time. And we would love that persons report their sightings to us, because that disease is one thing that for sure we are on the lookout for.
Mhm. So Hannah and Anjani have come from the Institute of Marine Affairs. Is this a significant element of the operation of the IMA? The whole business of looking at the reefs, attempting conservation strategies, etc. Or is it a tiny little area?
No, so the Institute of Marine Affairs was developed to conduct marine research to guide management and policy. So we focus on piloting the applied science so that we can hand over to the conservationists or to the management authorities to be like, this is our best findings of how you should manage an area, given that we're getting coral bleaching every couple of years, or the best frameworks that we can apply. And so that's why we have a lot of collaboration and discussions with communities and partner government agencies. It's really what we do. We focus on coral reefs, but we have the mangroves, the seagrasses, we have bathing beach area, water quality, we have environmental quality, we have oil pollution, other components of focus. But yeah, in terms of like what Hannah and I do, it is really focusing on developing the applied scientific strategies that can then be applied to policy, but also to hand over to communities and other agencies.
So, is there interaction with the policymakers around this issue?
Yes, I mean, there's constant. We have a policy department at the Institute of Affairs, and we are constantly, we have a history of deriving and drafting management plans. We drafted the Book Reef management plan many years ago. We drafted Speyside management plan. So we work with the integrated coastal zone management plan that was just passed by Parliament. So a lot of I think that's a really good aspect of IMA is that it goes direct. There's that direct connection with government. Anything government has questions about related to the marine environment, it comes directly to the IMA, and we give our scientific opinion and expert advice on it. And so we directly talk to our ministries, Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Planning, EMA, whatnot. We do have a very good connection there.
Well, you just introduced an interesting element, the whole business of energy. As we know, we live by energy, and We know also that there has been well, I don't know the quantity, what kind of percentage in relation to Trinidad, but there are surveys, seismic surveys, and some exploratory action going on. Are they impacting negatively at all on the reefs?
Um, in terms of not necessarily the Reefs of Tobago, I don't think there's any seismic impacts to Trinidad, but I can't say for sure because we don't necessarily monitor the non-coral reef environments. Those would be the benthic environments, but I can say that I don't think that there's a lot of literature around that, essentially.
Yeah.
So most of the seismic surveys are offshore,
Right.
environments. So they
Right.
definitely have impacts on the fish communities, which then will probably translate to coral reef communities.
Right. Hannah, what about the relationship of our, meaning Trinidad and Tobago reefs, with other Caribbean countries? We know that there are some significant ones. We hear about the reef expansion, etc., etc. Is there interlinkage, scientific interlinkage, that is, amongst Caribbean countries?
So within the Caribbean, yes. So we would say that Tobago is pretty isolated when it comes to the dispersal of larvae and that sort of organisms. However, we do have throughout the Caribbean we have very similar species, very similar populations. So interestingly, in the face of climate change, in the face of all this, there's work that's done in other places where they actually they took corals from I believe it was Honduras and they brought it to Florida and all these experiments and the thing is that it works. You can do that. So there is the movement of corals. There is exploratory movement of corals between countries, all in the race to save coral reefs. And while yes, Tobago can be a bit more isolated, we see that we have very special reefs. There we do have similar reef structures to the wider Caribbean as well. And I mean, I do think Anthony could also expand on this.
Can reefs be transplanted? Let's assume that there are some difficulties here or elsewhere. Can we take reefs from X country or Y country and so on and replant them in a different environment?
It is done. What Florida is currently doing is those reefs are currently in a lab. The corals that they have imported are not yet. They have to seek approval to actually put them out in the wild, put them onto their coral reefs. But I know that they are, based on the presentation I viewed, they are working on that paperwork. But I mean, that is it. Doesn't come without its ethics. It doesn't come without its, the stringent rules of what needs to be done, what needs to be followed before you don't know it's new. It's something new and you have to be careful with the risk that accompanies that sort of
Right,
activity.
right, right.
Yeah. So just to add to
Yeah.
what Hannah was saying, it's their call strategies like cryopreservation, which is sort of the most extreme in preserving our coral DNA. So scientists around the Caribbean have been cryopreserving coral larvae, right? And coral sperm. They can't preserve coral eggs because they're too fatty and they don't preserve well. So what they've been doing is that they've been trialing this. So once climate change has settled and we have a more consistent climate, there is a, like similar to like the seed stock in Norway, you would have a gene bank in the Caribbean to be able to plant out with it, at the end of the century where climate has sort of stabilized. And so scientists are looking at all at the far future, near future, intermediate future of all these different scenarios of coral research and conservation.
Okay. Alvin, the last word is yours. I directed this away from the ladies. Ladies always have the last say in everything, so I want to rob them of that opportunity today too. So you have the final say, Alvin.
Well, first, I forgot, or I forgot to mention, and I forgot to thank Angie and their team and Hannah's team for the tremendous amount of work they've been doing on the island. Informing the island, constantly working on that sensitive ecosystem. And I wanted, on behalf of the mariners, on behalf of the Dive Association, on behalf of the people who are familiar with the work that you're doing and know the importance of the coral reef, I wanted to thank them, because the book was launched in Tobago, and I said, God, I wanted to formally thank these people for the kind of work that they were doing. So I want to take the opportunity to thank you, because there's nobody else that's doing it. There's nobody else that's doing it, and they are passionate about the work that they're doing. Yeah. And I think it's a disrespect if it is that we don't get on board and at least learn about what they're doing. It's a disrespect to the hard work that they've been doing for years.
Yeah, yeah. One of the my wind up statement is that we are not shy in Trinidad and Tobago in doing research and proposing plans and programs and so on. Whether we implement them is a different story. So I hope for everybody's sake that there is some follow-up work with the book. Let me advertise it again. They aren't paying, as I said, they aren't paying for this advertising, but maybe they will say that their appearance on the program is payment enough. But seriously, this is a book that they will tell you about how to get it and how not to get it and so on, and when it will be available. I'm sure they will do that kind of thing into the future. We want to thank you very much, Hannah and Jenny and Alvin, for being with us this afternoon and getting some information and education out to the national community about this whole business of coral reefs, which are certainly looking at parts of the book. I haven't read the technical stuff, because I don't understand it. But the elements of it that are important, and all of the technical stuff is important, of course. But the thing that is important and understandable for the average person, and I have read it, and surely we're into a situation where we have to be conscious of the value of the coral reefs of Trinidad and Tobago. So, folks, thank you again for being with us this afternoon. Channel, when is the program going to be rerun and all of that? Tell them they may want to take another listen to their voices.
Well, I'm hoping that they would. So people, you can pick us up on newerattradio.com. Once you put us in your browser, New Era TT, you will see us there. One way or the other, you'll find us. Rerun is tomorrow morning, just at around 8:20.